Hi, welcome back, and I'm Charlotte Canier from Birth Essence, and today I'm welcoming Natalie Meddings, who's an author of How to Have a Baby, Why Home Birth Matters, and a doula with lots of experience supporting women in birth. So welcome, Natalie, today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really great. And I'd love to talk some more about confidence and underconfidence and why women don't feel confident. I know we've both had, between us, we've had 5 home births and 1 birth centre birth, and it's a choice that not many women are making in the UK, certainly I think most of the Western world. And I'd love to talk about why women don't feel confident to make those kind of choices.
Okay, so yeah, as you said that, I thought numbers are quite useful to say. So 2% of the country. So that proves that it's not a decision that women feel confident about. Just look at the numbers. 98% of women have their babies in hospital, 2%, slightly over 2% at home. So there you have it, proof positive, because they don't do it if they don't feel safe enough, or they I think if you were to explore the reasons, that's something that would be quite interesting for us to do. But overall, it's confidence. Women do not feel that home. I don't know. It just doesn't make them feel safe, I suppose, is the way to explain it. And for some reason, here's my confusion, hospital does. And that's where I wonder we should start our conversation, because it's interesting that 98% of women say, yes, I feel confident about having a baby in hospital. But why? Why, when hospital gives you the worst odds of anywhere, really, labour ward, slightly better in a birth centre, but the best odds for a normal birth, for a physiological birth, are home. So it does make you wonder, doesn't it? Like, it begs the question, like, why is it that if home, let's put it this way, I think you may know I don't like the word home birth. I think it's slightly it's too much of a headline. I think it's quite pressured these days. People don't like the concept. But if you just simply break it down from what it is, which is having a midwife come to you, that will give you, for first-time mothers, a 55% chance of total simple birth, with both mother and baby coming out in very good shape. 55% is higher than anywhere. It's about just over 20% of women in hospital have a birth without interventions. So given those odds, why is it, from a consumer perspective, that women are opting for the hardest place to have a baby? That's the first model, and let's break that down. The main reason is they're taking their information from received wisdom, just from what's in our culture. And our cultural, the main message is home is dangerous. Our main message is that birth is dangerous. And the two together, why would you? I think there's such a belief that birth is necessarily complicated, full of variables. You said earlier the word unpredictable. And it's very hard to break this down, to get people to believe that therefore home is going to be the place you go, because they're saying, yes, but what if? And they only have to look around at their friends, because of course that does seem to be true. But it's a catch-22, because if you go to hospital, that is where the variables enter in and where birth becomes unpredictable. So we were saying earlier, weren't we, about it's funny that ironic, that when birth got moved into hospital en masse, about 1972, pretty much everybody started having their baby in hospital, and had growingly been doing so over the previous 2 decades. They did that in order to standardise birth. Right from the mid-40s, they said, right, if everybody's in one place, we can make birth more manageable, more standardised, and there'll be better outcomes because we'll know where we are. Now, that was true in terms of antenatal care. Was amazing. Once you standardised antenatal care, you got a much better picture of women's health and babies' health. So in some respects, it's true. Everybody got equally the same care. But once you started, and then for 1950s and 1960s, it didn't make too much difference. Why? Going back to the confidence issue, because women in the 1950s and 60s still had a lot of collective confidence. They did so because it was within their memory of their mothers, their aunts. They would have still known it. So my mother gave birth. Actually, she did she did go to a birth centre, but she was utterly, a birth centre like a maternity home, but she was utterly confident, had a completely simple birth. My mother-in-law had all her babies at home in the 50s and 60s, and there's just no big deal. Okay, so there was a lot of confidence. By the time you get to the 70s, you only have to have the government, which is the Peel report, did this, just said, no, you know what, it's just safer for everybody in hospital. Then everybody moves to hospital and the complications begin. Suddenly, my mum's third baby was in hospital. She found it her hardest birth. Suddenly she's got bright light, she's flat on her back. She had people with masks on in the room. I mean, there would be people doing the sterile thing, right? I mean, doctors, with that kind of level. Whereas her first baby, me, would have been in a dark, quiet room with a midwife, but once you got into the mid-70s, you had some seriously sort of medical, seriously medical atmosphere. Is it any surprise that from there you start to see a real plummet in normality, but also hugely varying outcomes? So you introduce this level of unpredictability that no one talks about, and yet it sort of curiously goes on and on that people still opt for a hospital setting as the place they think their needs will be met. Now, then let's go to, well, what do women want? Because if a mother wants an epidural and she wants medical safety, then I would say hospital is the best place to go. Of course it is. And that option is there for you. As 75% of women do want, if 75% of women want what they say they want, which is they want a normal birth, a physiological birth as nature intended, then they have to think very carefully about where their needs will be met for that process. I looked after a mother in the spring, and she's a trainee obstetrician, and she decided to have her baby at home, and she's very scientific, very evidence-based, going on her gut as well, but she's certainly no alternative person. She's just absolute science-based. And she said, surely I should go on what is appropriate. I should make my choices based on what is appropriate for my health of me and my baby. So she was a low-risk woman with a low-risk pregnancy. She was healthy. So she looked at the evidence, she explored it, and she said, therefore home clearly gives me the best chance of a healthy birth. So when she had this baby, which she did very simply, she said a really brilliant sentence. She said, what should be happening is that women should be opting in for medical assistance, not opting in for home care. You should, like I currently, now, I've got a 2% chance of a heart attack as a 53-year-old woman, right? I was told that the other day. But do I wake up this morning and get a defibrillator out or take myself off to the hospital every day? No, I appropriately move through my life and I stay relatively healthy and have a sort of vague understanding of that risk, but it's a manageable risk, and I live my life appropriately around that risk. We do that. We all do that every day. And yet for some reason, when it comes to, well, I understand why, it's because people feel the stakes are so high. They don't do that around birth. They choose the strongest insurance policy they can find, which by default gives them the least likely chance of health. It gives them a kind of more confidence about survival. I think that's the thing, about the baby making it and then making it. How that survival is accomplished becomes by the by. And as you know, with 20% rate, just like over 20% rate of women, women in this country have a birth without intervention. So there's not many, 2 in 10 women. So that's 8 in 10 women currently have, an operative delivery or a cesarean, an epidural. It doesn't matter if you need it biologically, but if their birth is having complications, those things are amazing to have on hand. Of course they are, but to have them happen simply because the birth got kind of hijacked, if you like. Now, can I just say this is really important? I think people tend to think hospital ends in a lot of interventions because of medical staff insisting on them. And this is a big myth. And that somehow there's going to be a doctor there waiting with an epidural. So therefore, if I prepare, I hear a lot of women think this, if I prepare and I do my NCT and I do my hypnobirthing and I know my rights, I will go into hospital and that won't happen to me, and I'll have the normal birth that I want. But what women don't realise is everyone's on the same side. I mean, you rarely meet with a medical, maternity care staff who doesn't want to help you, and nobody's jumping out of a cupboard trying to force anyone to have a cesarean. What women don't realise is what makes birth hard is you run out of road in hospital. You have one room with 4 walls and a bed, even in a birth centre, right? You have a hard, rubbery floor. These days, there are no mats. I mean, sometimes in a birth centre you get a good bit of floor space, but it's getting less and less. It's harder to come by. You may get a birth ball. You've got a shower, and unlike a very small bath, maybe you may get a birth pool, right? But on the way into that setting, you're then also going to get in a car, deal with traffic, have to find a car parking place, maybe go in an Uber where you don't know the person and you're in a deep labouring space. So that's already stressful. You then have to navigate triage. You don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know the midwife in triage. That isn't even the midwife who's going to stay with you. You then have to navigate several corridors to get to the labour ward or birth centre that you're planning to go to. When you get there, you then have to organise the room, or a partner does, to make it sort of comfortable. And even in birth centre, it has to become your room so that your body relaxes in it. Then we haven't even got to maternity management. We haven't even got to the point where now you're on the clock. And now you're on the clock and you're being, how do I explain it? You're being observed in a way that puts all the focus on the hard bit, if you like. It's like everyone's counting contractions. Everyone's following your route. It's measured and managed and observed in a way that if somebody's got a headache, if you kept saying to them, how's your headache? How's your headache? How's your headache? How's your headache? It's so much focus on the hard, on the work, rather than, for example, the rest. So when you're with a woman at home, a lot of it is, as you know from your having your babies, you become really aware of those deep, relaxing spaces between, because you're just flopped out on your bed somewhere with your arm draped, naked or cozy with a blanket or whatever it is. You're just feeling the feelings. Nobody's particularly focusing on the timing of a contraction or how you're doing. You're just feeling it as you go. In hospital, the reverse focus is the case. Everybody's focused on the destination. When is the baby coming? Everyone's focused on how quickly you are, not quickly, what's the word? How en route you are. Are you on track? You're being tracked big time, right? Now, if I was to come to bed with you tonight, you don't know me, Charlotte. If I was to get into bed with you and your husband and I was to watch you sleep all night long, and every time you opened your eye, well, you do that with your children, don't you, having a conversation? and they keep staring at you asleep. But no, and you were to be timed, and I said, right, you are still asleep. Yes, you're still asleep. You're sleeping really well, Charlotte. Yeah, well done. You're sleeping well. No, you're not going to have a good night's sleep if you're timed and observed. Now, I understand. People take everybody so literally in birth world that I can understand it. I can almost imagine a healthcare professional saying, well, what else are we supposed to do? We have to manage and monitor. Yeah, but at home, a midwife knows how to do that subtly, unobtrusively, and in the way it's supposed to be, which is only as a kind of backup. You're not the birth isn't by definition taking place because we're being watched and observed and managed. It's happening anyway, and it will happen. Birth is inevitable. The baby needs to come out and wants to come out, right? But such is the case. Such is the way that the care model runs now. It's almost as if the birth couldn't and wouldn't happen unless the baby was being delivered or the labour was being monitored. Do you see what I mean? It's almost like a philosophical. I thought the other day, that phrase, if a tree falls over in the forest, if no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? It's a bit like that, It's almost hilarious. Is that how can I have literally heard medical maternity care staff say, well, if I don't give you a vaginal exam, how do you know you're in labour?
I've had that when I was pregnant.
Isn't that a strange question? There was who did I ask that the other day? Oh, there was a woman at my school. She didn't want scans. And obviously the system gets very flummoxed by that, because it's now there's no due date, and quite literally they said to her, how will you know you're pregnant? Then they said, how will you know your pregnant is developing? And she she literally, because she's very, very into it, well, she's just in touch with herself, and it's such a cultural challenge, so confronting, that idea to the system, and so strange to us in the public, if you like, that someone should step out, be off grid like to that level, where she didn't have any information about her pregnancy other than her own guide, her own inner feeling. So then she said, because I feel it. Now there's a thing, isn't it? It's like, oh, and now then suddenly one's brain goes click, 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 click. That makes sense. Well, of course she can feel she's growing her baby. I suppose some people would say, but she doesn't know the baby's growing well. Well, she did actually, because it was really growing well. And you can see, I mean, I personally believe an unthriving pregnancy, a mother would see and feel for herself. A bump would feel obviously not growing. And also I do believe that women know when things aren't right, actually. That's my own sense. Set that aside.
That's my own experience.
Yeah, of course they do. And to elaborate on that, think about the power of mother instinct once a baby or a child is in the world. It's lioness stuff, isn't it? I mean, you would do anything to protect them. And would you not agree, as a mother of 3, when my children come in the door and I hear the door bang, I know their mood. I can not bang. I mean, when I hear them walk in, I know how they feel, what's going on. I read them, right? We do that now as mothers, don't we? Why would it be any different in utero? A mother has those 9 months of pregnancy and she's learning her child. The baby's in utero and she's learning their normality. She's learning her normality. She's learning the conversation between the two of them. And when you get to hospital, so often in labour, so often that very, very useful and important conversation gets drowned out. That's basically what happens. And now the woman can't hear her baby, if you like. She can't hear what what her body needs. She can't hear what her baby needs. And it becomes much more managed, or rather she becomes self-managed, but not orienting towards what her body needs. She's managing herself towards what the care wants her to do, right? So everything from getting on a bed to adopting positions that she thinks she is allowed or not allowed. And I'll tell you something that we don't look into, which is fantastic that you give us this opportunity to look into the detail. Say a woman turns up fully aware of her choices, really genned up, hypnobirthing has been done, she's really understands, she's read books that have empowered her. She gets to her birth centre. Even a woman like that gets into a room that has been pre-arranged and pre-organised for her, her decision to squat or lean or get on the ball will still be intellectual, because she is doing it to arm herself. She's like, right, I'm going to have this kind of birth. I'm going to go into that birth centre and I know the positions I want to take up. Right. Sounds like a nice theory, but actually it's still very conscious, isn't it? Now you compare that to your birth when you had your babies at home. Did you put your leg up on the loo or hang off the shower or hang around your husband's neck or whatever? You weren't consciously adopting positions that you thought would be beneficial. So hospital creates so much decision and so much self-management, and basically a kind of sense of, what do I need to do? That in itself is neocortical. That in itself is a thought out mental, giving birth with your brain. If women could know what it feels like to give birth with your body, and you leave your brain out of it, and you literally follow the cues of your physical self, it is so infinitely easier, as you know, as I know, as thousands of women have their babies at home, they know. It becomes a completely different experience. We said earlier...
Okay.
So you get the idea that the reason birth in hospital becomes complicated for so many people are kind of hidden reasons that people don't know. They imagine they can control it, but they're actually, the reasons are much subtler than that. And it isn't anybody that's not on our side or against us, or it's not even, even on a labour ward, people are there to help you, but it's the environment is public, it's sterile, it's busy, it's full of variables. My husband used to say, hospitals are full of many moving parts. Is it any wonder that, you're introducing unpredictability, because you've got lots more variables? In your own home, you are controlled. The environment is yours and yours to control. So there's, nobody's going to suddenly walk in. You can control the temperature, you can control the space, you can move from room to room. You are in charge of it. Now, as soon as you're in charge of it, unthinkingly in charge, that's the point, unthinkingly, you then are able to stop being civilized, if you like. Stop. I mean, that's a strange word because people don't think I mean you want to get wild. Birth is wild, but that isn't what I mean. I mean civilizing. I mean in the sense you're not having to manage yourself in a rational way where you're having to make decisions or be in charge of yourself. So as a result of being in your own space, you completely let go to what you feel in your body. Once your body knows that, it goes, whoa, let's just get on with it and do it, which is why birth at home is often very much quicker than what the mother's body is doing in hospital is sort of is assessing. It's like it's basically scoping it. It's like scoping the environment. Is it safe to have a baby? Then it settles and it will probably start to progress. The body will do it, but slowly, drawn outly, just as you would if you were trying to go to sleep in a field. It's like vigilance. You need to be vigilant, even though your trusted caregivers are on your side. Your body is still going, but I don't know you. I don't know where I am. I've never been in this space. There isn't a farmer or a vet or a racehorse owner. I always look at those sort of areas. They would never have their female livestock trying to give birth in a completely new environment, like taking a herd of, a birthing ewe into into town or something to give birth. They know that they have to, they have to let the mother feel safe. We know that for animals, and yet for some reason we think that women are going to be able to deal with an entirely unfamiliar space with strangers and let go to her body's cues. I wonder if we could talk about more about this unsureness. I think it would be good to break down actually what women are really frightened of about home. Shall we go through that? Yeah.
And I know that one of the things that, I don't know if it's exactly what you mean, but something changes when women have had a bad experience and they suddenly realise, and that's where they suddenly get the sureness of what they really want because they've had a bad experience, and they go, right, I don't want that again, I want this. And that's when they start to consider home birth, which was outside. They don't even consider it because they're so conditioned to think, well, that's not safe, or it's not, I can't do that. Other people, maybe it's a nice idea and all, but I'm not confident, especially for the first time. And maybe they've heard that from, you said earlier, like people in the street saying that to them rather than the midwife.
I would say at least a third of the people on Tell Me Your Birth Story database have more than that, half are exactly that format, that combination where they've had a very complicated birth. They recognise that it was potentially not a biologically complicated birth, which would justify, medical assistance, and they sort of know somehow the birth got misdirected. You're so right. They instinctively know what they need. That's the question. And we
override it. It's either that we're conditioned to go with what our partner wants or what the person in authority wants, and to knock down our own intuition, calling it not scientific. And there's a whole historical thing to that. We're still in the throes of that. You might call it patriarchy, you might call it whatever you like, but there's a lot of that. And then
one big myth is, I'm a first-time mother.
Yeah.
I don't know. So you talk about back down our instincts. Well, okay, let's look at that. A first-time mother, I meet them all the time. They would say, well, what do I know? I've never given birth. Clearly, I'm inexperienced. There's a lot of talk of that. And I need to go where I'm going to have more backup, therefore. I'm going to have to go somewhere where I've got to cover myself because I don't know. Right. So the other day I was at an antenatal meeting, and the father said that. And he said, but let's just be straight with ourselves. He said, she hasn't had an experience, so we can't know. And I said, this is a strange parallel, but bear with me. I said, when this child comes out, it's going to, have normal bodily functions, isn't it? The baby's going to come out and it's going to sleep without you teaching it. It's going to wee without you teaching it. And it's going to poo without you teaching it. And it's going to breathe without you teaching it. These things are going to happen to this baby's body. I said, that is what birth is. The mother doesn't need to learn how to have a baby. just because she's a first-time mum doesn't matter whether she's first, second, third or fourth. Her body's doing it, not her. It's not a conscious act. When you present it to people like that, they go, it's like a light bulb. They go, oh. And then I kind of take it deeper and I go, do you really think it's something a mother has to learn how to do? How are we all here then? If it isn't being, it's running on it's running on a hard drive, primal programming of the human race. Is evolutionary biology. The baby is going to come, right? Now, where he's right, of course, is even in traditional cultures and in deep rural, you would still have first-time mothers will be accompanied in birth, and second and third won't. She ever just go off into the woods or whatever, So it is true that there's a little bit less confidence, but that doesn't mean her competence is less.
Mm-hmm.
Her body's physically. What it means is her confidence is less, which comes back to why we're talking. So how do you build that confidence? Good support first time is pretty vital. So and also first labours are a bit longer, so you need more support because somebody can help you to move through it. But in terms of actually, is her body capable? Every study will show you, and this is let's pick apart the first myth. Okay, you go and talk to a first-time mum, and she will much always say, home birth's not for me first time. I'm a first-time mother. There's more risk, and that gets left there across the country. Women are allowed to think that. By even in the midwife meeting, it's like, well, yeah, but my first time, don't you think it'd be better? I'm sure some midwives will say, well, it doesn't make any difference, but I bet you anything when women say that, they mostly get people concur with that, and they say, yeah, first time, probably better, maybe my second baby, right? So let's look at that. First of all, the birthplace study confirmed, to a lot of people's amazement, that it was, as the phrase is, generally very safe for a low-risk woman to have a baby in any setting. So what does that mean? Because it never got explained in the press, never gets explained. It means that whether you have your baby in labour ward, in a birth centre or at home, the risks are very, 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 very low everywhere, right? Which you could argue means it doesn't matter where you have your baby, but we know, let's not go into that.
How the experience feels is the
exactly.
really important bit that's missed off. Because everyone's looking at whether you die or not,
survival,
rather than how good the experience was, how you feel as you start your journey of motherhood, and all the parameters that are harder to measure. They might have longer lasting implications.
Exactly, long-term health issues. Exactly, including things like postnatal depression, even when that is massively increasing because of traumatic experiences. So just to go back to that home gets a birthplace study confirmed. And that surprised everybody, but it didn't get covered very well because it was such a shocking finding. I mean, what you're talking is, under a 0.25% risk, for a low-risk woman of anywhere. That's amazing. But there was at that time, they did say this. They said, but there is it was very tiny, increased risk for the baby's health for first-time mothers. Now, that's the only piece of information that got focused on. Even though, and here's something I want to spell out, even though the advice overall was that it was still significantly safe, the only message women seemed to receive, first-time mothers, was that, yes, but my first baby is in more danger than in at home and if I was in hospital, forgetting the fact that the point of the study was to see, is it legal, is it safe, can the British government say with a hand on their heart, yes, first-time mothers, you can have your baby at home? And yes, they were. That's what they meant by that study. That's why it's in the NICE guidelines. But that didn't get reported. It was just focusing. Now, I'm not dismissing a tiny rise in risk. That's for the mother to understand it, and understand it in context, given there is a very, very, very high risk of complications for the baby's health in hospital. Then let's go on to the second part. In August, hooray, a much bigger study. Let me find the name of it. It was told to me by a midwife, Hutton et al. In August, showed there is no increased risk to the baby for low-risk first-time mothers based on place of birth. And it was a 500,000, 500,000, confirmed that there is no increase in risk. So now we're even in a better position. So there's a chapter in my book called The Best of All Possible Worlds. And I I just couldn't help. I wanted to call that chapter that because it just is, because you've got the greatest chance of having a simple birth. It's safe on all fronts, now confirmed even more. So why is it that 98% of people continue to go to where they've got the lowest odds of normality and the lowest odds? And why? Because I think people mainly are mired in other people's misconceptions, fear that comes from the media. Everyone's telling them it's risky. And then for some reason we don't, I mean, a few people do, of course, but take it further and ask the question, like, well, where is that coming from? And then to look at the stats, the facts and the evidence, rather than Mrs. Brown up the road or, you know, the mother-in-law who says you're mad, and leaving it there. Or even partners. I mean, we were saying earlier, like very often a partner, a husband may say, no, I think, you know, it's too, let's not take that risk. And then doesn't himself know anything about the facts or the stats. I mean, the guys that I've met have said that. I then say, well, have you seen the evidence? And they haven't. So they're making a decision about the birth that's going to impact on the child's life and the mother's life based on prejudice. So where in our life would we agree to that? If you know, I know it's a bit simplistic to say if a man came round and said, we need to change your roof, or you need a new car, the engine's going to blow up. I know then there's much simpler decisions, but it is a bit kind of like, you wouldn't just do that without further investigation. And yet you only have to have partner, neighbour, friend, aunt, colleague say, oh, you're joking, you're brave, really? Why are you thinking of homework? It's so dangerous. And it gets left there. And nobody looks any further. Even though if you were to say to your midwife, is it safe for me to have a baby at home? She would say yes. She has to say yes because that's the facts. It's not an opinion. And yet for some reason, most mothers make their choices about birth on opinion, not facts. So that's the first thing I tell people to, in terms of what we're talking about, building confidence. If you have to grow your confidence, it will be built, it will start to ignite with instinct as well, like the things we've talked about, and you will start to feel better and better and stronger and have more and more faith. But where it needs to start is the evidence, the facts, the truth, the biology, so that it's safe to have a baby at home, first or second, third time, whatever, if you're low risk. What's the other myths? Oh yeah, we said the second myth, yeah, it's not safe for me as a first-time mum. Well, we now know that isn't true because those studies have shown that. Can you think of any? I mean, I'm thinking of the things people say. It's messy. Here's another myth. People think it's noisy. They get worried about those practical stuff. Again, did you find it very messy? I mean, it's a bin liner's work.
No, I don't know, because I wasn't the one cleaning the mess, but the second one was in the shower, so it was pretty not messy. The towels washed out. You know, whatever happened in the shower, that just washed down the shower. The towels washed out. We used our normal towels. We used our normal good towels and the blood washed out, whatever blood there was. And you have in a home birth box those mat things that you sit on, so it doesn't, you sit on that and it doesn't go on the bed generally.
There's it, isn't there? Like, let's picture that. So where have they got that from? Given nobody in this, how many people would have seen a home birth? Zero. I mean, I honestly, most of the country will never have seen a birth at home. So what they're doing is they're conflating the images they've seen on telly of a woman screaming on her back, or instruments, or I don't know what they're thinking, and somehow people imagine that it's bloody, it's messy, it's kind of gruesome or something. When we're talking a couple of towels worth, so that's something simple. Just another myth. People worry about this is late second and subsequent birth. People worry about their children. It's a big worry for people. They think oh, but I'll be screaming or something, and that will be traumatizing for my children or my neighbors or something like that. So noise and behavior, that isn't appropriate for home, right? That, you know, I need to be in a medical place where I am going to be managed, and honestly, that's kind of where I'm going to be, in a soundproofed room where I'm not going to cause any problems, sort of thing. Or I might freak my child out if I'm making lots of noise. But that's to miss the point that women at home are very rarely distressed. I mean, I've never seen it. They may moan and breathe and make noises and move in a way that helps them, but they don't look distressed. So children are never ever, I've never seen a child freaked out by anything. Plus which, you're calm and at home, you feel good, you feel confident. There isn't that sort of level. That's another myth. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, the obvious dangers for the baby, and this is the final thing we can say, is not obvious dangers, the assumption that there are dangers, sorry. So that people have their heads full of what ifs, and they say, but what if my baby isn't breathing? What if I bleed? What if X, Y, Z, right? So I advise people to go through those fears one by one with a trained midwife who works at home. Nobody else can assuage those anxieties. I wouldn't try to do that as a doula because I'm not a medical practitioner, and no one should try. But take a midwife and do not make any decisions about home or hospital until you've had that conversation, and go into the nitty gritty. So what do you do if my baby needs some help? What do you do if I'm bleeding? The first thing to say, which any home birth midwife gets quite frustrated about this, they're not winging it. In the words of one great home birth midwife near me, I am a trained, skilled and drilled midwife, she said, that is doing exactly the same thing when I work on labour wards as I do at home. I have the exact same equipment. Okay, you can't have a cesarean, but the point is that because of her one-to-one attentive care, she will have already way in advance of any big issue have seen any diversion from normality and would have already transferred the person in, even with the tiniest variation. So you don't get to that point. And then the other thing she said is she's great at breaking down the real fear. So let's take the idea of a baby not breathing. She said to me, I love this. She said, people imagine that a baby not taking a breath is like an old man who's collapsed in the street with a dicky heart. She said, this is not the case. She said, we know through assessment in pregnancy whether the baby is equipped for birth. We know whether its organs are healthy and well formed. So we know it's got a pair of lungs, we know it's got a good heart, and we know it's functioning. We then, in the labour, are checking how the baby's coping. Even though we already know it's equipped, we're checking extra with the monitoring, right? Intermittent monitoring. So we have a very good picture of the wellness of the baby. So this idea that a baby could just randomly turn up without breathing is already incredibly slim, right? And this comes to the biggest myth of all, which is that people imagine if a baby isn't breathing, that somehow it can't breathe, rather than what it is, which is that, as you I'm sure know, the lungs are full of fluid, and as they're squeezed out as the baby's coming out through the vagina, the fluid gets squeezed out through the baby's mouth. And on arrival, there are the lungs are little vacuums, and the air rushes in. Now, so sometimes it's not a massive, oh my God, my baby wasn't breathing. It's just complete biology that just needs a bit of a rub down with a towel. Even a whiff of oxygen, that happens in hospital all the time, but nobody talks about it. It's just standard that the baby might need what they call a bit of help. That doesn't mean the baby was in a do or die situation of high risk. It's just standard arrival, that the baby sometimes, it's even just kissing and snuzzling and kind of licking, mothers almost instinctively and they pink up. Now that delay...
If they haven't had the cord cut. Like if they've been born, the cord hasn't been cut, their cord's still there. It's still giving them oxygen at that point. They've never breathed before.
12 minutes.
Their first time.
Exactly. So it's in that respect, it's like these are the kind of conversations that build confidence. If you go, I just don't think people take the conversation far enough, deep enough to look into their fears and have them explained. Now, when people have these very simple things explained to them by a very skilled, experienced midwife, you literally see, and then you realise you've made, your thinking is based on pretty flimsy stuff. How does a baby breathe when it arrives? Or, for example, bleeding, how is it dealt with in hospital? Okay, it's dealt with an injection. It's dealt with the same thing at home. But here's the thing to know. Your chances of bleeding are far greater in hospital. Far greater. Why? Because labour is much longer in hospital and the womb gets tired. And when it's tired, it doesn't contract back and you have a higher chance of hemorrhage. Birth at home is less taxing on the body and the womb contracts back with more efficiency. So there you have already a kind of distinction that no one talks about. And somebody said to me somebody said something to me the other day I thought was fantastic. They said, isn't it interesting the way everybody says about birth at home, but what if this and what if that, and if I did this, what if this? Nobody does it the other way around. So given we've got like 80% of interventions of births to have interventions now, how many people say, would that have happened if I was at home? What if my birth had been at home? Would I have had that hemorrhage? What if my birth had been at home? Would my baby have needed to be taken out by forceps? What if I'd had my baby at home? Would I have needed that cesarean? No one asks the other way around. And yet, clearly that's the question to be asked, given in 1953, where nearly everyone was having their baby at home, 92% of women had no interventions at all, nothing, no cesarean, no, not medication, forceps, induction, whatever. They're all just giving birth. That's nearly everybody. So clearly, home does provide, that extra safety, and we can clearly see from that the hospital setting does make. We know that. Everybody knows. The research confirms that. It's hospital creates complications. I thought it might be interesting actually I went to a home birth this week. Should I tell you a little bit about it? Because I thought it might be quite a good example of what we're talking about. My favourite way, I think the most useful way to approach home as a setting is to not talk about home birth at all, and simply do it as it was done in the 40s, 50s, 60s, which was you had a midwife. That's all you knew. You just booked your midwife. She knew you knew her. She visited you through pregnancy in your own home, and on the day she came round. There was no home birth plan. I find that very pressurizing. I think it feels like it shuts down options, and women think, oh, then I've got to transfer if I want an epidural, or it's a bit confining. But if you just say, look, all you're doing is you're booking yourself a midwife at home, and we'll see. And if things progress smoothly and simply, you'll probably very likely want to stay put. And if they're not, you can go in. Okay, and when midwives do that model of care, the normality rates go through the roof. You can't imagine. Confidence goes through the roof, normality goes through the roof, labour becomes easier, births happen simpler. Anyway, so this woman did this. Most women I'm with, they do this. And she technically is booked for a home birth, but in her mind, it's just an open-ended, flexible plan. Now, actually, it turned out to be quite long. She had a couple of days build up of early labour, what I call the build or room one. Labour itself started on Tuesday night, and she gave birth the following evening. Now that's quite long for home, in the sense when it began, it was the full-on 2-minute contractions. Now, if she'd been in hospital, I think I can pretty much guarantee that would have been a cesarean, because on so many ways there were 3 junctures at least that felt complicated. Did she feel it as complicated at home? No, because and did she feel it as long? I don't even think so. Maybe she felt once fed up, it was a bit long, but she certainly didn't see that length as being an impasse. If you have a long labour in hospital, very quickly you run out of options, very quickly. Your birth pool now doesn't feel so attractive if it's going on and on. The 4-walled room now feels quite limited. Plus that very monetary measuring thing we talked about starts making you aware you've got a long old way to go. That is very hard on resources, mental resources and reserves and stamina and endurance. At home, you change rooms. So let me tell you what we did. So she started, and I kind of knew, because we'd had a bit of a slow, long build up, that she could be having quite a slowish labour. And so I sent the dad to bed. Immediately we create space for ourselves because no one's watching and timing it. We didn't need a midwife at this point. He goes to bed 2-3 hours. So she just lies by a fire, a real fire, covered in blankets, big pile of pillows, and just sighs and breathes her way through the night, right? But I know we haven't got too far by 5 a.m. Now, 5 a.m. in a hospital, having gone through the night, is going to start to feel really bleak, actually. Dawn comes and you're still only 3 centimetres or something, right? But she didn't have any vaginal exams because she didn't need any at this point. There was no midwife there at this point. I'd spoken to the midwife, but she didn't need to come. And then, so then she gets a bit fed up, and we changed change the tone, we change the mood, we have a shower. Dawn's coming, we need to refresh. I made a little bit of porridge. We get her upright. She gets hot. So we change rooms to a cooler room where she's got a day bed and put a loose and nice cooler night dress. And suddenly she feels revamped, re-energized. Husband comes in, starts doing things. As we progressed through the day, the midwife came. That created another sort of encouragement. She's so lovely, fantastic midwife. We all make tea. You make some lovely tea, warming tea, fennel and ginger and honey, and she recharges. And we just move through the different twists and turns that to her do not feel like obstacles. It just feels like what it is, her labour. That's all it is. Slowly the baby starts to come. Actually, I mean, I should probably finish off so people can see that she had a calm, confident birth, labour. She felt good all the time. She felt joyous, actually. At the end, she was pushing for too long. We felt, or the midwife felt, and she advised transfer. Was that emergency? No. Was it urgent in any way? No. Was it distressing? No. She shouted out, "Have you got the snacks?" to her husband. I remember she said that because that's how calm she was. "Have you got the snacks? Let's take some snacks. Have you got the pillows?" And in we went, and she had the baby 40 minutes after arrival. That's how calm she was, right? So even in a transfer situation like that, which is people's fear, isn't it? It's people's fear, like, what if I need to go in? As any midwife will tell you, for the vast majority of women who need to transfer, who, by the way, you know it's for biological reason. That's the other good thing. If you do need to transfer, you know you needed to, right? So there's not this randomness that you have in hospital where you don't know whether you really needed an epidural. You don't know whether your progress was slow because of your body, or was your progress slow because you were disturbed. Whereas at home, you will know that. I knew this woman's body, maybe it was a position thing, we don't know what it was, but she needed to go in. So she was very relaxed about the transfer. And in most cases, I mean, most reasons women transfer is for medical pain relief. Very rarely it's for medical reason. And if it is medical reason, that is still not, or it's usually a blood pressure rise or it's some anomaly, and they're on it. And in the word of that great midwife, she said, "We arrange timely transfer." That's the word, timely. It's done conservatively with precaution. Home is not some place where you're like, oh, let's just see what happens and we'll just throw every caution to the wind. It's very, very careful, very and couldn't not be in a Western country. Of course, that's what's great about home birth in this country, is that we have everything we need. The safety is there, the hospital is there, the excellent midwifery care at home is there. Which brings me back to therefore it's the best of all possible worlds. Gives you the greatest odds of a normal birth. It's completely safe, as we now know from the studies, and it avoids all the intervention-y, all the factors in hospital that make birth so hard are absent. You only have the things that build confidence and make it flow. So there you go. I've gone on a bit. But I mean, there's so much we could say that makes it. I mean, I suppose we could talk a bit about our own confidence. How did you?
I think that, like we said, with someone who's had a bad experience, then the light bulbs go on, or if they are clued up enough to ask the right questions, and the light bulbs have gone on. And that's what I'd really like women you're listening to hear, to question when they're overriding their gut instinct to go with the plan that someone else wants, when really they can feel what they want inside, and to question the whole idea that birth is not safe. And if they can't feel at the start that birth is safe, there's facts and there's different methods of looking at what is going on in your own thoughts, because we believe our thoughts and our body responds to, well, this is the thing about having the neocortex and so on, we respond to our thoughts in the same way that we do to actual events from a biological perspective. So we'll start firing off hormones or adrenaline or fear from a thought which has no basis in reality. And so for me, what advantage I had was from prior therapy. Love, you've lost it. was that I knew that my own birth into the world I experienced personally as a baby as traumatic. So I already had this determination to change that around, do something different. I knew it could be different from having the visualization of that. So I was ready to do anything to create that. So again, like you said with the other example, it seemed like a no-brainer for me to be at home, and all the evidence that you've pointed out in this conversation. And then every time I got fearful, any fearful thoughts about being at home or about birth in general, could I do it? I've not done it before. What if, you know, someone tries to tell me I should do something and I want to do something else? Because this was my personal pattern, was confidence about doing what I wanted and not what other people thought I should do. And so I looked at those every time to work out ways to clear those. And then I had the home birth as a first time mum. I know you've lost it. Home as a first time mum. And then I continued that with the second and third. So I'd love for women to really take that time and consider what they really want. And then, like you said, unpicking it to see.
And in the third stage, it can take you consider the options factually. That then fires up a bit of confidence. And then to lead you forward and through is then to understand biology. So in another chapter in the Why Home Birth Matters book, we look at the best of possible worlds, and then the next, let me see what it was called. Hang on, just look at the chapter titles. It was called Why Birth at Home Works. I'll read this bit, shall I? It says, in your own home, your body has exactly what it needs to labour with ease: comfort, control, freedom, time, trust. In your own environment, these ingredients are in plentiful natural supply, and when brought together act as a catalyst, helping the birth to happen. Birth at home becomes an unhurried happening, unfolding in your own comfortable time on your own uninhibited terms. And then where it goes is to actually look at you cannot argue with this, inarguable, non-negotiable biology. And that's where, again, the confidence can sit. So first we look at the evidence around, you know, the environment and look at the evidence like that. But let's look at the deep evidence, which is what you just said, which is what about basic standard biology of birth, that it's not us. I mean, I do love looking into choices, and of course a woman has to know for herself what's right for her, but what she first and foremost needs to understand is basic birth biology. So home ticks all the boxes. What needs to happen? Two things. Her pelvis needs to be free, and all the pliancy and flexibility of her ligaments and bones and everything being able to spread and expand needs to be optimized. That is best done at home, where you can lean, lie, hang, swing, rock as you wish, which you may think can happen in hospital, but less so, just less so. Very often, as we know, most people end up flat on their back.
It was my experience in my births that in the first I was in a pool where I got a lot of flexibility, more so than my natural flexibility because of the water. And in the second, it was progressing really fast. So my husband had gone downstairs to do the pool. I knew he wouldn't have time to do the pool, but I didn't have the words to explain to him. He was calling the midwife, she was on the way. And so at that point, I had no one to defer my authority to, or to, you know, I was just me. It's just like, okay, like you said earlier, just get on with it. And then I found positions. I didn't think it through first. I just did it.
Yes.
You know, oh, I'm standing up, better get down a bit, you know.
Yeah.
Don't want him to shoot out on the cold floor kind of thing. So I got low down and all those things. But they were, I didn't need to think about it first. I was incapable of thinking, like you said, with the biology. I was incapable of thinking, and that's the good thing about the biology. You're not supposed to think it through with your head. It happens different places. That's what happened.
I know I keep going back to the sleep thing, but you know, you don't need to teach yourself how to sleep. When you're the other day when I came back from that birth, I was very tired, right? I was in the middle of the day, so exhausted, of course. My body knows how to sleep when it's tired and will do it anyway. It'll do it instinctively, involuntarily. It will close my brain down and shut my eyes. Birth is the same. Just let it happen. Listen to your body. It will do it. You will naturally adopt positions that will aid it. So the other thing you need, so first of all, you need I always think of it as the pelvis as being a bit like the vehicle, if you like, but then you need the petrol, the fuel, in the engine of labour, which is the hormones. So oxytocin would be literally like gas, you know, and you need loads of it, and you need it to flow uninhibitedly. At home, it does. Why? Because the oxytocin flows when the thinking can properly go to rest, when the neocortex can properly go on the back burner, and that allows the hypothalamus, which is the instinctive part of your body, to take over, and birth becomes an urge. When I say an urge, I mean it's like an urge, like a hunger, like thirst. It's an urge. You're compelled to labor, right? And if the hormones flow at the level they're supposed to be flowing, and build and flow and build and flow, another beautiful thing happens. As the oxytocin, the hormone that drives labor, releases, you produce lots of endorphins alongside it, and each triggers the others. So the greater endorphins trigger more oxytocin triggers other endorphins, on you go, spiraling into this deep chemical dream, basically, this biochemical dream, like you're just in this trance. Now, there's another reason why hospital's hard. Labor in hospital, very often the gears aren't moving through. You're not able to reach that pitch point, that climax of hormones. And so you never really get the natural opiates, the natural painkillers, the natural endorphins that actually aid you. So in so many levels, hospital kind of can inhibit a woman from all these wonderful things that nature has in store. You know, freedom to let the baby navigate the pelvis. If you leave a woman to it, she will be upright, leaning, squatting, to do all sorts of things, because she knows, or her body knows rather, her body knows what needs to happen to release the child, right? Similarly, hormones, it knows the mother needs to be in a very pliant mental state, like needs to be very soft, very released, very relaxed, almost, you know, quite gaga. You know, you need to be completely in a state of let go. That is hard to have. That harder for to happen in a place where you are necessarily conscious, you know, because you don't know hospital and you're with strangers. In a way, you manage yourself. That keeps you just enough in your brain for your hormones to not flow quite enough. That's what then makes birth long. Do you see what I mean? So oxytocin runs about, in my experience from observing it, probably about, in a good birth, even in a good birth in hospital, they run at 3/4 of the level at home. In a difficult birth, a fifth, in my experience. So, you know, your oxytocin would be a car in gear 2 on the M5. You know, it's pop, 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 pop. You can see it like that. Whereas at home, it soars. The hormones soar. The women are pulling off their clothes because they're hot. Why are they hot? Because oxytocin is now making that great big engine heat of birth. Then you've got, so now let's put those together. You've got flowing, superpowered hormones. You've got a pelvis that's pliant and free. Gravity is working for you. The baby and the forces of the contractions are driving the baby down and through. Suddenly you've got stars aligning. Is it any wonder that labor now makes sense, one, to the mother because she can feel the progress, but the body's agreeing, basically, and the mother's agreeing because the body's agreeing, and on we go, and the labour is concluded safely and quite swiftly, usually. Do you know what I mean? So that's going back to when we say, yes, the woman needs to know. I get it that she can't know first time because the culture is continually saying, birth's hard, birth's unendurable. But if she listens and then finds out what her body needs, then she'll be even more convinced. I'm just going to read you this. Birth is something to manage and endure, now feels like a necessary reality, a fact of life. But it's not the fact of life. And women haven't always felt that way. In the first half of the 20th century, women gave birth to their babies at home in large numbers, the vast majority successfully, and most of them more easily than we do today. There was a chain of confidence, a shared understanding of what to expect and what would be needed. And reinforcing both was the uncomplicated routine practice whereby a midwife came to your house when you were in labour. And it just simplifies everything and allows, the way I like to describe it is the baby and body lead, and the care is wrapped around them. In hospital, it's the reverse. The baby and body have to completely wrap around the hospital. Do you see what I mean? It's like maternity care is the leader and steering it, and the baby has to fit in with those parameters. You switch that, and you get the baby being the guide, the steerer, the torchbearer, and the midwife. That's what that birth felt like in the week. We were following that child, you know, its journey, and then they come because they know they're in charge. The mother is listening, the midwife is listening, the doula is listening, the dad is listening, and it happens so much easier. And it's so frustrating because the confidence that comes in, it's really interesting to see this, that when you see women that are a bit unsure about birth at home, and they're a bit like, oh, I'll have a midwife come, but I still think I might go in. I think I will want an epidural, just to let you know, they say to me. I have never, in 17 years with that arrangement, ever, and there's been a lot, hundreds, I've supported hundreds of women, and not hundreds of that situation, but a lot of women. Never do they say, you know what, I do think I'm right, I'm going to have that epidural now. Okay, never, ever. It's never happened. Because once they understand with their body the benefits, the benefits are so overwhelmingly obvious and so overwhelmingly advantageous for mother and baby, the mother never doubts again. So I suppose in a way that's the conclusion of our confidence conversation, is that confidence becomes felt at a cellular level, at a spiritual level, at an emotional level. She feels confidence right the way through her physical self, her emotional self. She feels utter, you know. And if people could, a midwife once said to me, if we could put in Trafalgar Square, or, you know, the what's that big roundabout in Birmingham where you live, you know, some big, you know, the bull ring, whatever it's called, if you could put a massive video screen up of a woman who's just given birth in home and a woman who's given birth in the labour ward, she said, if we could, it was amazing. She said, if only you could see how women feel, you would clear the way, you know, how they look, how they act, how they respond in those moments, the joy, you know, I mean, women, of course, joyful when they receive, you know, when the baby comes, wherever they are, of course, but I mean the wellness is what I mean, you know, how well you feel, you look, you seem, how well your baby is, you know. These are what things that give women confidence. Millie Hill actually said years ago, we turned sleeping, you know, like safety belts in cars. It was a massive deal. The woman who suggested it in government got so much flack. They introduced safety belts for all overnight. People understood it. You stopped smoking. All these institutional, government-led decisions. You only need somebody to decide, let's do this. And everybody follows, and very, very quickly the benefits become clear, right? Home birth could be like that. If you just had a kind of almighty, you know what? It's an opt-in. If you want medical care for your baby, opt in. And then they'd have to think about it, wouldn't they? You'd have to think, what's appropriate for me? I am a low-risk healthy woman, therefore I need an appropriate setting for that. You opt in for cesarean, you opt in for medication, you opt in if you need it. That's what used to happen, and it's there for you. There's no if a woman just chose it simply because she chose it, that's also absolutely valid and brilliant. But if she wants a natural birth, and that's her first choice, then she needs to opt in for medical care only on the basis of her need, not by default. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anyway, we've kind of gone around the houses, haven't we? But there's
No, I agree. I would like to see it opt in. I know there's the local hospital to us made their next to birth centre. That's my husband leaving for work. Made it opt in, so the low risk women are automatically at the birth centre rather than the labour ward, and then that changes it. So it's like a step in that way. And I think
that shut everybody up. And then the home birth rate was rising through the noughties quite steadily. Up. It got to 2009 and it stalled, and it even started to go backwards. And I didn't know why, and I analysed it. And it was a really simple reason. Birth centres got increased. So there were more and more birth centres, and that forestalled women's decision making. So I think we were heading up from women starting to get more and more confident. And then the birth centre option got mooted for more people. And the
compromise situation between the hospital and the home. Yeah. Where people can go, I feel safer in there, but it's more like home, because they tried to make it more like home, right?
It seems theoretic. That's what I did with my first baby. Now, I got the best version because it was a stand-free birth centre, and they are the best of all. They're the highest normality outcome. When there's no, because you dive in, you dig deep, the midwives are confident, you get the same as you get at home. But if the birth centre is adjacent and attached to a labour ward, the honest truth, if you look at the stats, I've got them here actually right next to you on my computer screen, it's shocking actually that the birth centre does not provide much in the way of normality, as you just have to look at the stats to see that. You know, I think it's 11%. Hang on, let me see if I can find it on here. Sorry, I'm just moving you to one side because I've got it on my screen. Where is it? Oh, there we are. Will you vanish if I get it up? Basically, it's, might as well read it to you because it would be useful. Okay, it's not coming up, but basically, I think, I've forgotten the stats, but huge numbers of women want to go to the birth centres now for the reasons we've said. But they need to then ask the next question is, how many women stay in the birth centre? Very, very low. Oh, here we are. So, freestanding, to come up, let me just see. So 49% of women surveyed want to give birth in 9% do. 9% give birth of 49%. It's pretty shocking, isn't it? I think that's pretty shocking. 6%. 6% of women prefer to give in a freestanding midwife unit. 2% do. So if you combine that together, 11% of women who of nearly 60% give birth in the birth centre. Does that make sense? So nearly 60% want to be in birth centre, 11% manage to stay there. Now, the further analysis of why that is, I don't think it's been done. I'd like to know it. Why do women...
It's the same for all birth centres, or if some, because that's nationally, is it? And if there's a difference in different centres, and what are they doing differently, and that kind of...
Why isn't it not compared? Because I bet it's not as high in some and it is in others.
I think our local one's really good. It's got a really good reputation.
Really?
I send people there, and I don't know if you've heard of Catherine Guthridge, because it's local to Birmingham. Yeah, well, she's the one that started this. You know, she for all this, so it's led by her, and again, that, you know, it's coming down through her. She had a standalone one that had to be shut down, but, you know, like the best places seem to be a bit of a pattern with that. And that was fantastic. But Serenity, the local one to us, people go there.
Oh, that's amazing.
Often, if they're not getting a good deal somewhere else locally, that in respect of wanting a VBAC and wanting certain things, and they're not comfortable to be at home, they often can go to Serenity, where others won't accept them because they're a VBAC. They will accept there. And
it's good to know.
I don't know the stats. I have to say I don't know the stats, but I would be surprised if it was as low as that, based on the people I know that have been there. Again, it can make a difference for you is the midwife on duty and how the woman is. There's lots of variables, but I think it's a good place.
I think that possibly that has terribly low numbers are probably brought down by London. I think a lot of the London hospitals, the birth centres don't deliver what they promise. It's not anybody's fault. It's not, and the care is still kind, compassionate, supportive of labour.
Break it down and look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't want to, please don't think I'm saying it's because it's poor and things. It's nothing to do with that. It's the reasons we discussed at the beginning of the conversation, that normally the mother has often underestimated birth and overestimated what a birth centre can provide. That's my main feeling, is that, and even things like judging when to go in can be a factor, because that creates a lot of tension. The counting contractions, when am I going, and which, by the way, of course, in home birth you're not doing, because you're just being with the feelings as they're happening.
Midwife, she can come and go if she needs to. If
you're not self-assessing. But if you've got the suitcase in the hall and the dad's on an app, and you know, I mean, you these apps that people have got, timing contractions, they make birth so much longer. I'm completely convinced.
Yeah, I don't like the apps particularly, because it's something external again, more external things that.
It misses the point. It just misses the point, because it makes the mother observe herself and observe her progress, and stops her from going deeper into the feeling of it and being guided by the feeling. She's assessing her journey and her arrival point by, you know, and looking at it's too conscious, too cognitive. So that would be a reason. Like, so you leave to go in, you then get triaged, you then eventually get into your birth centre. And, you know, you are going to have birth pool and low lights and good positions and freedom. And many of the things you'd have at home, it's absolutely true. But it still comes back to what we said at the start, which is that there's an awful lot of focus unwittingly and unintentionally on each contraction, each and every single wave, which will then becomes very easily felt like pain. It becomes all about the effort, not about the rest, and that's what happens. You really notice at home that women move rest to rest rather than contraction to contraction. They work with the good bit, and they work through the wave, the pressure wave of the contraction, to receive the rest. And here's something that we haven't talked about, actually. The other good reason about birth at home that is very, very largely overlooked and no one talks about it, is what obstetrician Michelle O'Don talks about. He says that in hospital, women are deprived of, I'd even say robbed of, the transcendent state of birth. So he talks about there being, in a way, unwittingly, nobody's doing this on purpose, the hospital can act as a gatekeeper on a woman's accessing those deep, deep, deep states of transcendence that birth can bring, that are an alternate state of consciousness. They are very, very profound. You'll know it yourself. I always think it's interesting. You try to get a woman to describe her home birth in detail. She very rarely can. She'll remember snatchy moments, but basically she's so lost in her oxytocic flow, and then she's so in her birth trance, she won't have any awareness of the blow-by-blow details. Whereas if you ask a mother in a hospital birth, she'll know everything because she was consciously there and present. So that state that you go into, that's so easy to go into at home, is a life adventure. It's a life quest. It's an event that nothing can compare to. Nothing. It's, as woman said on that Birth Reborn, not Birth Reborn, what's it called? The Business of Being Born, Ricky Lake's film. Have you ever seen that?
Not seen it, but I've heard of it.
There's a midwife there, and she says it's like going to the moon. And if you have to quiz the relative merits of going to the moon, like, where do you go from there? It's like to tell women, if you could explain to women what they're going to access. Not always. Sometimes birth can still be quite complicated and slow at home, and you won't reach those pitch points. But most labours at home, the mother is able to enter the deep state that she needs. And that gets overlooked all the time. And then, of course, in that deep state, there's natural opiates in her body are otherworldly, And wouldn't that be something to have interest in, or confidence be found in, as a life experience that is it's interesting, if nothing else. It's also a privilege. It's a privilege and an honor to access the life force like that. That what your body is capable of. That's that. When people talk about that, that's the level. And it would be so amazing if we could kind of try and even in this little conversation, if anyone listens, to if we could know that we'd one woman that they said, oh, you know what, I'm going to look into that more. I'm going to see how it feels. Amazing. It's such a shame that the vast majority can't even get past those first obstacles because everybody wants to tell them the negatives. I wish we could get a big blackboard behind you and write on a big orderly list positive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the information on the evidence, the information on the biology, the information on the how birth helps, how home helps you. We haven't even gone into comfort, but
there's too much in one interview. We'll have to do another one another time.
Yeah, you've got to go.
We can't do it all in one day, but you get the the essential things is to start people on a path, and people can read your books, people can just talk, listen to the other interviews. We go into some of the points you've raised in different ways with different people, and just reflecting. Because I think that we are led. There's like this desire inside of us. The reason this summit is happening is there's a collective desire for this to change, for the way birth is to change, wherever it is. It's a desire for it to change, to be more like this transcendental experience, this valued, respected, honoured, and for women to be valued, respecting, honouring. The whole shift that wants to happen, and how birth happens is part of that. And I think it's a real calling that women are hearing, and we're in that difficult moment where we're hearing the calling, but it's the hard part of going against those first steps that can be hard, of going against everyone else is doing.
It just made me remember something that might be a nice thing to end on. I had my second baby at home, and I did so because I'd gone to a training with Michelle O'Donnell, and I always think he has very simple, very succinct ways of getting women to understand it without too much effort. So I'll tell you what he says to women that just made me go, oh, okay, what am I even thinking of wasting the petrol and getting in the car, right? Because my plan was to go back to the same birth centre as the first time, which was a very simple birth. I had a simple birth in the birth centre. It was wonderful. But I went to this training as a doula. He was training us. And he has a simple sentence. He says, you know, a natural birth, but obviously therefore supported by birth at home, results in gives the woman the best chance of the mother and baby being in good shape. Simple phrase, good shape. It goes, mother is in good shape, baby's in good shape. It's a really lovely, simple, modern phrase, like you're in good shape after an ordinary birth. An ordinary birth, a normal, a standard physiological birth, the best way to define it, has its best chance of happening at home. So he said to me, you want you to be in good shape? You want your baby to be in good shape? Stay at home. And I went, oh, okay. I hadn't thought of it. And he said, and I had a doula. I hadn't had a doula before. And he said, yeah. I mean, your body knows what to do. Just don't move. And it just became like a foregone conclusion. It's like, well, of course, And I think if women had that simply uppermost in their mind, because most people want a well baby and a well them, yeah? Well, let's make that your starting point, because that home is where you get that. Should we end there?
I think we might have to. I hear my husband coming in, which suggests I might need to give him a lift. I don't know.
Thank you so much for the chance.
Yeah.
You're absolutely wonderful to allow this level of detail.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I'm going to put show notes up so people can come in and refresh on, smaller parts of it, because it will be long interviews. But I'm hoping that, like you said, if one woman, it makes a difference, that's where you start, with one woman and the next and the next. And say the brave things that people aren't saying, because people come back and go, how can you say that? Because the status quo at the moment is different from what we're saying. So then people, I'm not saying you have to think like us, saying think about it, reflect, find your truth, but these are the things you might not have considered or thought about before. And you can't know what you don't know. So here I'm putting things you might not have thought of. Have a reflection and you'll find your way. Your way is waiting for you to find. It's calling to you.
And for some women, they may go through all the information we've said and still the hospital is safe.
Yeah, and if that's what's calling them, then they might be doing the absolute right thing, that theirs is one of the really 1% that needed to be in hospital. Because some do, no matter what you do. And if you're listening, then that you're going, this is what is right for me. Even though I want a home birth, I've got to go into hospital. But what's happening is people are going in through fear-based rather than conviction in themselves. And the same for home. They're not having a home through fear rather than, it saddens me when I hear people say both ways round, I knew something was wrong, but I thought I really wanted to do whatever. That doesn't happen so much as the other way around. I don't really think it ever happens, because people, if something's wrong, they act on that because you want the safe baby. But if what they want is, I want to stay at home, or I want the birth centre, I want whatever I want, but I'm not giving myself permission to validate my needs over other people's, or against these fears of doing the wrong thing, not being safe, being a good girl, all those things that are conditioned. And that's why I'm hoping people reflect and honour what their truth is. And it's not saying you've got to give birth here, there. It's saying, what's your truth? When you follow that, you'll know whether it's home or hospital.
Right.
And that can change in the middle of labour or whatever, because it might be that your conviction to be at home that changes in the middle of labour is the birth experience that your baby wanted, that you wanted. And it's an empowering thing to say, right now we need to transfer, even though there might not be any clinical indication. Be listened to in that, and you go. To stay at home or to go, it's like finding that confidence to trust yourself when you are the opt-in, when you are informed on everything and trusting your body. And there might be work to do. We're talking into other interviews about why there might be work to do to relearn that trust in your body if something's happened to you in the past. I've talked about with Alexa with light and hard fears. So light fears are what most people have, where the media, the everything is stripped you away. Harder fears might mean you've had abuse or something happened to you, which has put extra fears you need to unpick. But essentially, ultimately, you're following that in you to find your path with confidence and then we just turns the statistics on their head, essentially. That's what I would want to see, turning that on its head. All of the statistics for the intervention, turn them around. The statistics for the turn it upside down to be the opposite, and that is entirely possible and reasonable to me. And it's kind of like a way out there thing still to say at the moment, less so perhaps than it used to be.
The other thing, just to finish, is that people, like, did you hear the Deliciously Ella podcast with Millie Hill? I mean, that was a really thinking, informed woman who's clearly really responsible, you know, it's really self-determined about her health as her whole business, isn't it? And she's that modern woman who, you know, that's the thing that's crazy, is that modern women, you know, are big into, you know, obviously choosing in an informed way and shaping their life in an informed way. That defines modern life. So that's the bit that is the ultimate kind of ridiculous. It's kind of like a cruel irony. Yeah. It's irony, and it's a cruelty that women are so oppressed, really, by the culture, by the media in particular. I hold a lot to account, to be honest, because I think they are controlling the narrative a lot. I mean, you could hear it on Monday with Millie with this on Radio 2. You know, the people that had it was so shocking how there's one story in town, and even though everything that Millie's saying and everything we're all saying is evidence-based, and they just come in with those sort of same tropes, and then women are victims, you know, they're made victims, and I think if most women in this country knew that and really stopped in the way you beautifully just described and found their truth, they'd actually get quite angry and think, I've been quite duped here. Do you know what I mean? That's what I think. Don't be fooled. You don't do it about your work. Why would you do it about your baby? You know, you don't do it about your life choices. You don't do it about your partner choices or where you want to live, how you want to frame things. So why would you do it about what is probably the most important thing you'll ever do? You know, it's not enough just to say, oh yeah, get yourself informed choice. It is absolutely obligatory, really, given it's so important. And just to live congruently, i.e. you do it everywhere else, so do it for this, you know, and that's what we mean by empower yourself, you know. Think. There we go. Enough rant for one morning.
We can talk again another time, but thank you so much for coming on, and I'm sure there's lots of food for thought for people to really, you know, we'll take it further and go from there. So thank you so much for coming on.
Very much.
Great to listen.
Bye-bye.